Good morning, everyone. A little bit slow to get started this morning. So I made my own axe target last night. Well, I bought the lumber a couple days ago, and I actually made the target last night. Works really well. I'm satisfied. Okay, let's see how many we have. Wait for a few more to join. Hola. All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to share my desktop. All right, so once again, this is coming from the textbook. There's a chapter in your, actually, I think there's 2 chapters in your textbook that are online as opposed to being actually in the textbook. So you go to the website, chapter 18, and last time we talked about handling mouse events. This time we're going to talk about handling keyboard events. Maybe we'll do audio clips in the maybe next week. But I think the chapter on audio clips is kind of or the section on audio clips is kind of antiquated. So I tried it on my computer and it wasn't working how they said it was going to work. So we'll see. Okay, so let me just bring up my code that I was working on the other day. Whoop. Okay. So this assignment that you're going to be working on is called GUI 4. So I have a class named GUI 4. Let me just make this a little bit bigger for you guys. Zoom in. Okay, so once again, extending JPanel. Okay. And so this class has 3 fields. One of the fields is an image, which is the same. It's going to be the same image that we had last time. And then we have 2 integers, x and y. I could have done this on the same line by just putting a comma in there, but I don't know. I like to do just my personal preference is to have one variable on one line. And so these are going to hold the x and y coordinates of the upper left-hand corner of the image. So if you recall, in the last lesson, I just had the image put at 0, 0. And then in this one, we're going to put it at just some general spot. Okay. So if I look at the constructor for the class. Again, it has to throw an input-output exception because I'm opening the image file. Okay, so I'm going to do that exactly like I did before. And then also I initialize my my two variables x and y coordinates to 0. Okay, so that's where they're going to start out. Now, for this J panel, so there's a method that you use to make your container sensitive to inputs from the keyboard. Okay, and so that method is add key listener. Okay, so you are going to use the add key listener to make a component sensitive to keyboard commands. Okay, and then you have to say what you're going to add. So I added a new my listener. Okay, and so the my listener is going to be a private class. This is a private inner class. Okay, called my listener, and it implements the key listener interface. So let's take a look at what is the key listener interface. So we can see interface key listener, and it's from java.awt.event. So you can see that what I've done here is I have an import statement that is java.awt.event.keyListener. So you must import this to implement the key listener interface. Okay. So what's in this interface? So you've got basically an interface is saying if you have a class that implements an interface, it has to have all of the methods that are in that interface. Okay, so there are 3 methods in the key listener interface. It's key pressed, key released, key typed. Okay, and so they're exactly what they say. All right, it's pretty obvious. They all take a key event, which is called E. All right, we'll talk about key event in a second. All right, so my class basically has to have these methods. So keep doing that. So let's look at the my listener class that I've added to my my GUI for JPanel. So I have you can see that I have the key pressed method is defined. I have the key released and the key typed method are also defined. Okay. So basically I have the 3 methods. These 2 methods I'm not going to use, so I left it blank. Okay, because we're not using them. But I have to include them because they're part of the key listener interface. All right, so if if I'm not doing anything with them, you might say, well, why do I even bother to type it? It's because when you do an interface, you have to have all of the methods that are in that interface in your class. Otherwise, you're going to get an error. Okay, so that's a little bit unfortunate. All I'm doing is the key pressed interface. And all of these methods take a key event E. All right, so you can see up here I have an import statement that's java.awt.event.keyEvent. So you must import this to implement key event. Or not to implement, to use the key event class. All right. So let's take a look at that key event class. Have it right here. It's got a lot of constants for this key event class. Okay. And these constants are basically different keys. So all the constants are VK underscore something. And so the VK stands for, I believe, virtual keyboard. Okay. And so you can see there's VK underscore 1. That means the, did someone type 1? There are all these just VK underscore different keys, functions, all kinds of constants. So that's not really terribly important. So what we have is basically we can get the key character. What was the character that was typed? Okay, so you do e dot get key character to figure out what was typed. So that's really what we are going to be using, is the get key character. All right, and also I think there's some other. Yeah, we just want to use the get key character method. Returns the character. Or you can use the get key code. So for all of these constants of this class, you can see that these constants are integers representing different keys that you can have on the keyboard. Okay, so basically get key code is going to return the integer representation of that particular key. All right, the get key character is going to actually return the character itself that someone typed. So you could use either one of those. I think I used the get key code method. So let's go to that. So I'm only using the key pressed method, and it accepts a key event called E. So I'm going to define an integer z, which is e.getKeyCode. So remember, get key code is going to return the integer associated with that particular key press. Okay, so that's why I have z, an integer z set to it. All right, so z is going to hold the integer code of the key pressed. All right, and so basically I'm going to do a different thing depending on where which key is pressed. And so I have if z equals this constant, if z equals that constant, if z equals that constant, if z equals that constant. So I'm doing a different thing depending on which key is pressed. All right, and I'm only looking at 4 different key presses. Okay, I'm looking at was left, right, up, or down pressed. Okay, and so basically I'm thinking about this almost like a game, right? You're using the 4 directional keys, and you're doing something based on which directional key is pressed. Okay, you can see if left is pressed, I decrement X by 10. If right is pressed, I increment X by 10. If up is pressed, I decrement Y by 10. And if down is pressed, I increment Y by 10. Now that might seem backwards to you, but you want to remember that Y increases downward in graphics. So the origin is kind of the upper left-hand corner of the window, and Y increases downward. So by decreasing Y, I actually am moving upward on the screen. Okay, so that's why I have that backwards. I originally wrote the code with a plus and a minus, and then I was like, oh, why is this doing the opposite of what I expected? I make a mistake. And then I thought about it a little bit, and I remembered that Y increases downward, so that's why that's happening. Okay? And then I call the repaint method. So I guess I should have looked at paint first. So what is paint doing? Paint is drawing the image just like before, but what we did in the last lesson is we drew the image at 0, 0, so at the upper left-hand corner. But now what we're going to do is we're going to draw the image at x, y, which x, y is it starts out at 0, 0, but I'm changing x and y depending on what the user types in. Okay, so I'm drawing the image at potentially different locations based on what the user types in. All right. Now remember, I have to include this repaint, which is going to draw the. So basically, the user presses a key. All right. That changes where the image is going to be drawn, but unless I tell the computer to draw the image again, it won't do it. So I have to call the repaint method to draw the J panel again. Okay. And once I call the repaint method, it's going to call paint again, and it's going to redraw the image, but at the new coordinates. Okay? So you must redraw if you want the J panel to change. Okay? So the paint method, so the image is drawn at x, y, not 0, 0. So let's look at the main method. Okay. So the main method is the same as it has been for the last few lessons. 800, 800. So I'm making this a bigger window. Exit on close. So this is the J-frame. Remember, the J-frame is just an empty container where I can put stuff. So I put the J panel. The J panel canvas is a GUI4 object. And then I'm going to add the canvas, add this GUI4 to my J-frame. I'm going to make it visible. And here's an important new piece of code, which is keyboard events will not be registered. Oops, I gotta comment that. Unless the component requests focus. Okay, so this is different with mouse events. So if you click the mouse, Mouse events are always going to be picked up, no matter where the mouse is clicked. As long as it's clicked within the particular component, then it's going to be picked up. But a keyboard event is not going to be picked up unless that component requests the focus. So you can see that my canvas, which is a GUI 4, requests the focus. And I did that at the very end so that I know that once this program runs, it's that component has the focus. So that component is going to be listening to the keyboard, okay? So if you have multiple components that are all sort of needing to use the keyboard, you're going to have each of them requesting focus whenever they want. You're going to have to write some logic within your program so that each of those components requests focus at the appropriate time. I made it easy on myself because only one thing is requesting focus. Okay, so let's compile this. It compiles, and let's run it. So it's just a single picture of bug. And so I'm typing on the D-pad of my computer. And you can see when I type on the D-pad, I'm changing the fields X and Y, and then redrawing the window. So I'm basically moving the picture of bug around with the D-pad, which I think is kind of neat. Whee! Puppy Bug's moving around. Bug, you're moving around! You're moving around, Bug! Totally not digging what I'm saying. Bug! You're moving around, man! He's sitting at the base of my chair, just looking confused. Bug, you're moving around, dude! Come on, Bug! This is pretty cool! You're moving around! Okay. Anyways, so that's my program, and that is my introduction to keyboard events. So let me just go over what were some of the key things that we talked about. Okay, so we had a class that was called. So we had the class key event. And if you want to use the class key event, you had to do import java.awt.event.keyEvent. Okay, if you want to use that class. And that class basically allows you to have the key event E, but it has a bunch of constants for keyboard presses. All right, so that's useful. So they were VK underscore something, and so they looked like this. You had to do key event because they're a static constant of the key event class. So it's key event dot VK underscore something, and so that's the code for different key presses. And then also it has two methods that are probably going to be useful, which are the get key code or get key character, okay, which is going to return an actual character, And then we also have the get key code, which returns an integer. Okay, so those are the things. And then we talked about the interface key listener, because you had to add a key listener. So to use the key listener, you import java.awt.event.key listener, and that was an interface, and you have to have 3 different methods in that. So any class that implements key listener must have 3 different methods. One is key pressed. One is key released. And one is key typed. Now, even if you don't use them all, you still have to define them as just empty methods. All right, and they all take in a key event E. All right. The last thing I wanted to talk about is you must use a component's request focus method to register a key event. Otherwise, your program will do nothing. So I think I'm just looking through my program to see if I left anything out that was important. I guess the last thing that is that you use a component's add key listener method. So yeah, that's basically what you need to know. I think on Tuesday, or excuse me, Monday when I see you, I'm going to introduce the IA. And then on Thursday, I'm going to talk about sounds. So how do we put sounds in programs? And I think that'll be sort of the last thing that might be useful for your IA. I might after Thanksgiving break, we might talk a little bit about maybe some web programming or something like that, just to I'm just trying to think of all the skills that you could possibly need for your IA, and just kind of going through them one after the other. So, but we're going to start the IA pretty soon. All right, so that's my lesson for today, and I hope you guys, well, I'll see you in the Zoom room.